During moments of war, the passion for life is often at its most intense. That was certainly true nearly 27 years ago for a handsome young soldier named James Warnick and a beautiful California teenager named Patricia Pierce. War was beginning to erupt in Vietnam, and suddenly Patricia found herself romantically involved with the dashing young Marine from the state of Ohio. At the time, Warnick was stationed near Patty's home in Hemet, California, and for several weeks, these attractive young lovers carried on an impassioned affair.
I was crazy about him, and it was a beautiful relationship. He was probably the most handsome Marine I've ever laid my eyes on, and I'll never forget him. He looked like he stepped off a Join the Marines poster.
But then came the inevitable. Lance Corporal James Warnick was shipped off to the deadly jungles of Vietnam. First, he did try to write, but according to Patty, her parents never really liked the soldier, and when his letters arrived at the family's mailbox, Patty believes they were intercepted and thrown in the trash.
And my dad didn't want me running around with a serviceman that came to town. You know, he didn't like that idea.
And so this brief summertime affair between the handsome Marine and the beautiful teen seemed destined to end, except for one small detail.
And I probably was about a week pregnant when he left. It is the best I can figure. I didn't know I was pregnant when he left. He says that he wrote to me. I never got the letters.
But then suddenly, Patricia did get word of James Warnick, the young soldier she'd watched march off to war and the father of her unborn child. It was not an official statement. It came through an acquaintance. But it was the kind of message everyone who's left back at home lives in constant fear of one day receiving. Patricia was told that James Warnick had died in Vietnam, that he had been killed in action, an American hero, and a name that would one day be inscribed on the dark and dramatic wall of the Vietnam Memorial.
He was a Marine going to war, and that made me proud. You know, there was just a real good quality about him. He never would have walked away if he had known. But it was pretty rough.
But through all the rough times, Patty always had her little soldier, the son she named Scott.
I'm real proud of my son. He's everything. All throughout his life, he's asked me, what does my dad look like? And I go, well, he looks just like you. Well, what kind of a guy was he? Well, he must have been pretty good. He's a war hero, you know. He must be pretty terrific. And when he get good grades, I tell him, your dad's going to be, you know, if your dad was alive, he'd really be proud of you right now.
But without knowing exactly what happened to his father, there was always something missing in Scott's life, even when the boy became a man. So when the traveling replica of the Vietnam Memorial passed through the Nevada town where Patty now lives, she decided to give her son a special gift for his 26th birthday. She would find James Warnick's name on the wall, attach a red rose, and take a photograph for her son to keep and remember.
I just felt that that's all we had of his dad. We didn't even have a picture of his father. And that would be like the final thing that I could give him and say, here, this is your dad, the war hero.
I mean, a name on the wall would tell me that was him in my eyes, in my life, in my heart. You know, that's all I wanted.
So I go to the wall, and number one, we get there, and I mean, this thing is huge. You know, I thought I'd be there all day looking for this name. And then somebody said there was a directory that you could look through. So I start thumbing through there, and I get to the W's, and there's no Warnick.
She couldn't find his name. Couldn't find it. Nowhere. Up and down the wall, she could not find it. So she asked another vet that was there, you know, what does it mean if a man's name is not on the wall?
And I'm telling you, it was like a punch in the stomach. I knew right then.
He must be alive. You know, if his name's not on the wall, he's got to be alive.
I went home that day. It was April 26th. And I wrote that day and requested information on a Marine from a certain state, born in a certain year. And I waited 5 months for a reply.
And when that reply from the Marine Corps finally came, Patty learned that James Warnick had in fact survived Vietnam. But because of a federal privacy law, that's all she learned. And that's when she alerted her son. She also decided to take one last stab in the dark and simply call directory assistance in Warnick's home state of Ohio. Within minutes, she was on the telephone with the father of her 26-year-old child.
And I said, "Do you remember?" He said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Did you know that we have a son?" And he was real quiet, and he said, "We have a son?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Why in the hell didn't you call me sooner?" And I said, "Because I thought you were dead." And then we got into a car. Then I started crying, and he said, and I knew this was when everything was going to be fine, he said, "Would you calm down? Everything's fine now." And that same feeling of strength that I had known 26 years ago from this young Marine was still there. I mean, what a quality man.
It was not like, I don't want the responsibility of being a father.
There was no question.
He was happy. That
Almost irritated that I hadn't called him earlier. And I gave him the opportunity to, to back out. I said, all we don't want anything from you. All I want is for you to meet your son. And he said, that's not going to be a problem.
And for this fairy tale reunion, Scott and his father selected a place well known for its fantasies and dreams, Las Vegas, Nevada, a place where this father and son team that had already beaten the odds could first meet and get acquainted. But during their initial weekend together, there would be much more than just that, because Scott also planned to have his newfound father act as the best man at his wedding.
I just want him as my friend. He's my best friend. She always asks her best friend to be your best man, right?
This is a guy you've never met, Scott.
But this is a guy that I've known for 26 and a half years.
Do you feel like you've known him?
Sure. Sure I do. He's a hero to me. Doesn't matter what happened. He's still my hero. And he's my blood.
For more than 26 years, it's been a story of two ships in the night. But now Scott Amo and his long-lost father are on a tearful and loving collision course with destiny.
Scott, I'm your father, and I love you. And I hope I can be your friend.
In Ohio, James Warnick and his longtime wife Charlotte prepare for an odyssey that will change their lives. In Las Vegas, Scott, his fiancée Valerie, his mother, and her husband Jim await their arrival.
Really good. From our chapter to you.
And while they wait, a Nevada veterans group presents Scott and his mother with a book called The Wall. For it was, after all, Patty's efforts to place a rose at the Vietnam Wall that started the story in the first place.
I got all kinds of butterflies in my stomach and everything, just waiting.
But during a layover in Denver, the weather causes a lengthy delay. 26 years have passed, but now each hour seems like a century. Emotions run high, and when the call comes to reboard the plane, they rush to the surface.
That announcement right now, we're getting ready to board the plane. I'm ready.
This is our last time, just you and me.
I love you too, Mom.
There's your dad. This is your son.
Thank you. How are you? Hi, Dad. Hi, son.
What do you two look alike?
Oh, thank you.
It's incredible.
In a matter of seconds and in the warmth of an embrace, 26 years seemed to melt away. At last, all were together. And that night, this extraordinary family gathered for Scott and Valerie's wedding. Perhaps it was poetic justice, for the wedding seemed to bind them all forever together.